So spring is here, it's my favorite time of the year, so I wanted to teach you some very common and useful verbs that you can use to talk about the spring that's coming up. Hey everyone, my name is Wes from interactiveenglishvideos.com, and we are all about helping you practice and improve your English skills. And today I want to help you build your vocabulary as well as improve your grammar, because I want to teach you some very common and useful verbs that you will hear and that you could also use if you're talking about the spring. And you can use these verbs in a variety of different ways. It's not always just to talk about the spring, and I will talk a little bit about that as we go through these verbs. So when you think about the spring, you probably think about flowers and plants. So a very common and useful verb that you may hear is blossom, to blossom. And this is just talking about when flowers are produced, that there are trees and the trees will begin to blossom, the flowers appear, it's very bright, it's beautiful, lovely colors, and you could say they are starting to blossom. And another verb that, well, I think of flowers in this case would be to sniff. Somebody might tell you that, or they might ask you, hey, why don't you sniff these flowers? They smell really nice and you can sniff the flowers. This is another verb that I think you would often hear if you're talking about maybe perhaps an animal. Think about dogs, they might sniff. They're taking that small, short breath and they're trying to smell something and they would sniff. If we're talking about plants, then you might use the verb sprout. And if you have a seed and it starts to sprout, it's just talking about it is starting to grow. And when you put it in the ground and you start to see the plant, you could then say, yes, the plants, they're starting to sprout. And then there is another phrasal verb that you could use, and that is teem with. And you might be talking about an area that is teeming with flowers. And in this case, teem with means it's full of something, full of activity, full of life. And you could say that, well, the garden is teeming with flowers. But you could also use this phrasal verb if you're trying to describe some area, like a park, and you could say, well, it's teeming with people. It is full of something to teem with. When you think of spring, you probably also think of growth. So some verbs that we can use to talk about growth would be flourish. And if you describe something as flourishing, then you're saying that it is growing successfully. You're saying that it's very healthy and it is starting to flourish. So a garden could flourish. You could also say that a business is flourishing and it's growing successfully, to flourish. Then we have the verb to rejuvenate. This means that it describes something that is starting to look better. It is growing, it is developing, and it's starting to look better, it's starting to look healthier, and you could say that it is rejuvenating. And in this case, I think of spring, the trees start to blossom, and the flowers come to life, and everything around us just begins to rejuvenate. It starts to look better and look healthier, to rejuvenate. And then we could also say breathe life into something. And this is more of an expression, but it's talking about you are bringing something back to life, and it is growing, it's developing, it's healthier. And in this case, if something may be dying or it's struggling, you could try to breathe life back into this thing to make it look better, make it look healthier. And you want to breathe life into something. In the spring, you may also think about animals. So some verbs that you might use with different animals is like emerge. You could say that animals start to emerge in spring, and this just means that they start to become visible again. For example, you could say a bear might emerge from its cave. It becomes visible again. Now, if we're talking about specific animals or insects and the verbs you might use with them, you could say that birds chirp. You could also say that crickets chirp. Bees would buzz and frogs would croak. So those are some different verbs that you might use with specific animals or insects. In spring, eggs also start to crack. A chicken's eggs will crack, and then you'd have those baby chickens. And this is when you would hear the expression a spring chicken. And a spring chicken is talking about just a young person. And often you might hear it used in the context of somebody trying to say that they are not young anymore, and they'd say, you know, I'm no spring chicken. For example, I could say, yes, I'm starting to get older. I am no spring chicken. No, not anymore. I'm not a young person. And of course, in spring, there are many activities that people might do. For example, people might mow the grass, and you would use that verb, to mow. People might also have a barbecue. And you could say they are having a barbecue, or you could just use barbecue as a verb, and you could tell somebody, hey, you know, let's barbecue this weekend. Let's get some food, invite some people over, and we will barbecue. And a very common verb that you might use in spring is get. And there are several different collocations that you would use with this verb, these words that are frequently used together. So somebody might try to get healthy in spring, and they're trying to exercise, and they just want to get healthy. And when they do that, they may get outside more often. To get outside, that's another great collocation. You could also get a whiff of something, and in that case you are smelling something that's in the air. You get a whiff of something. And you might also get allergies. This is a phrase that I understand very well, because every spring I always get allergies. And in spring, the weather changes as well, so there are some common verbs you may use. For example, to melt. If you are changing from winter to spring and you live in an area where there might be a lot of snow, then the snow will melt. You could also use the verb shine, to shine, because I think spring, there are more sunny days, and in that case you would use this verb more often, to shine. The sun is shining. You could also say that the temperatures, it's starting to warm up. That is a useful phrasal verb. To warm up is just talking about the weather becoming warmer. And then if it's raining outside, you could use verbs like drizzle. This just means to rain lightly. It is drizzling outside. Or you could also say sprinkle, that it is sprinkling, and it is just a light rain. So drizzle and sprinkle, you could use them interchangeably. It is just talking about light rain, which you may encounter in spring. So those are some very common and useful verbs that you may hear if somebody's talking about the spring, or you could even use if you're having a conversation about the spring. So in the comments, let me know, what is your favorite thing about spring? Let me know, and maybe try to use some of these verbs just to get some practice. If you enjoyed this lesson, please hit that like button. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.